Psalm 133, a song of ascents of David. Behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head, running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord has commanded the blessing, life forevermore. It's a commonly repeated claim that we no longer have much of a sense of community in the West. And whereas it can be all too easy to get carried away with grumblings about how bad everything has become and aren't things so much worse than they used to be, none of which, by the way, I agree with, I think that there are reasons to agree with this claim, that community has diminished somewhat in our society. In our neighbourhoods, it is so easy, quite often feels very natural to live lives that are entirely separated from the lives of our neighbours. There are very few communal events to draw us together, and the draw of the high quality entertainment we get on TV, online, through gaming is, after all, so great. There's little community in the workplace as well, only productivity, and we are, each of us, mere company resources that just happen to be human, individual units of production. One of the things that this pandemic has done is to highlight just how far we have let this situation get away from us. And so we've welcomed opportunities to show our solidarity for others, and we've done so as communities, whether it's through clapping for carers in our streets or holding minute silences in our workplaces. Perhaps the pandemic will have reminded us just how important community really is. And it is really important. A community is, after all, a natural necessity. Humans are social creatures. We've thrived because we cooperate, because we share, we coordinate our efforts, because we relate to each other in complex societies. Community is fundamental to what we are, which is why, of course, lockdown has been so hard. And were it not for the technology we've got on our smartphones or on our computers to maintain some sort of contact with each other, it would have been a great deal harder to endure. And community is also a practical necessity. We can't achieve anything by ourselves. In the past, we've put up statues to commemorate, usually men, who we think have achieved something worth celebrating. But not one of those men achieved a single thing by themselves. The Duke of Wellington didn't beat Napoleon's forces by himself, nor did Aneurin Bevan create the NHS without the involvement of an army of helpers. It's when we work together, when we share knowledge, when we cooperate in the pursuit of a common goal, it's then that things really get done. And community is also a welfare necessity. It is well documented that good relationships and a sense of belonging to a community is essential to our mental health and also, incidentally, to our physical health. And I guess we could say to our well-being in general. Isolation, alienation, loneliness, these are painful experiences in the extreme, and they do a huge amount of damage. Again, the pandemic has not only led to many thousands being taken ill with coronavirus, it's also led to many thousands suffering through the isolation that they've been forced to endure. But this psalm presents us with yet another way of looking at community. The psalmist wrote it to be sung by pilgrims as they journeyed to Jerusalem for one of the main feasts celebrated there every year by the Israelites. It's a song that reflects on the experience of those pilgrims as they journeyed together in their small communities. And for the author, it's this experience of community that he highlights as being a pleasure. Now, too often in interpreting the first verse of this psalm, the stress is put on the word unity, as though it's the unity that's important and not the dwelling together. And what often follows is an angst-ridden discussion about what unity really means in this context and how it is that unity might be achieved. This is what the verse says: "Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity." But the truth is that the word unity doesn't actually appear in the psalm, at least not in the original Hebrew. It's put there by the translators in order to convey the strength of the word to dwell. You see, the word for dwell conveys a kind of communion between people, an intimacy, a welcoming of each other. The problem with overstressing ideas of unity when we come to this psalm is that we end up talking about concepts, about ideas, rather than talking about people and relationships. We ask questions like, how can I get on with someone I disagree with, as though agreeing with one another and people agreeing with us is the most important thing in the world when it comes to unity. But what's important is actually being with others. And that's really what the psalm is telling us. This is what's important. Being comfortable with others. It's a rarely used word these days, but communing with others is what's important. Welcoming others into our lives, welcoming others into our world. And bearing in mind why this psalm was written, we can say that what's important is journeying with others through life. This is what our focus needs to be on when we come to this psalm. And what does the psalm have to say about this journeying with others, about this communion with others, about community itself? Well, it tells us that it's pleasant, pleasurable, pleasing. Why? Well, because it is. That's how God has ordered things. The psalm doesn't go into any deep sociological, philosophical or psychological explanations for this. All it's interested in is the experience itself. And it doesn't want to ruin it by switching from enjoying the moment to some deep intellectual analysis of community. No, there's no reason given as to why it's pleasant. It just is pleasant. And what follows then are two poetic descriptions of this pleasure. The first says this: "It is like the precious oil on the head running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robes." Now, in the ancient Hebrew and Greek worlds, pouring oil over your head was considered a very great pleasure. But bringing Aaron, Israel's first high priest, into this description indicates that this pleasure is God's blessing, bestowed on the community he has created. And the psalm goes on then with a second description of this pleasure. It says that it is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord has commanded the blessing, life forevermore. And this is a picture of vitality, a picture of flourishing, because the dew from Hermon would water the surrounding parched land during the dry season. Community, that experience of being at ease with others, the experience of solidarity with them, that experience of openness and mutual affirmation, with no mind games being played, no competition is allowed to ruin things, where every effort is made to accompany one another, to walk beside each other, to be attentive to one another. This is the stuff that life is made of. It is the blessing of God, and it enriches the soul, just as the dew of Hermon enriches the surrounding soil. Community is itself pleasure. So look for community. Find it. Make the most of it when you find it. Find it not just in one place, but in many places. In your neighborhood, your workplace, online, and of course, in church. And when you find it, keep it. Work hard at it, and you will find that it really is God's blessing for your life.